stories are powerful when you have data and the experience behind that. And
this episode of the Coach's Call podcast is presented by Answers, ANSRS, the fastest, most accurate data and video management system in football, used by major college programs and high schools all across Texas. Instant insights from Answers speeds up the game planning process during the week, ensures that the tendency data is accurate, and provides play callers with real confidence to make the best calls during the game. Visit www.answers.ai, that's ANSRS.ai, to learn how Answers can help you gain a real competitive advantage next season.
Hi, y'all. Welcome to the Coach's Call, the official podcast of the THSCA, where every conversation is about helping coaches help kids. I'm Libby Pacheco, COO of the Texas High School Education Foundation, and we're glad you're with us. Before we get to today's conversation, here's a few quick reminders. We encourage you to get involved with our Educate, Excel, Play campaign as we continue to promote and defend education-based athletics across Texas. Also, don't forget to check out the Texas Coaches Leadership Tour. When you purchase a ticket to any one of the 9 events, you'll receive access to the replay of all 9 sessions at the end of the tour. And finally, remember, as coaches, we set the standard year-round through sportsmanship, professionalism, and the example we model for our athletes and communities. So thank you to all of our programs that are engaged in continuing to lead the Texas way. We are making a difference in sportsmanship in Texas. If you want more information about any of these events, don't forget to visit our website. And now, here's today's episode of the Coach's Call.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Coach's Call. I'm Chris Daly. I'm joined once again by Libby Pacheco, and I'm going to hand the mic over to you, Libby. Introduce our guests and what we're going to talk about.
Thanks, Chris. I'm excited to be here again. So welcome to the Coach's Call, listeners. And today's episode is one that I'm especially excited about because not only am I talking to 2 of my really good friends, but we're also talking about something that coaches have known in their hearts for a long time. But now that we have the data to prove it, education-based athletics changes lives. Today, we're diving into some groundbreaking research from the Everise Institute and the University of Texas that really is able to measure that impact. So no, it's not just the wins and losses. It's all the things that we talk about as an association about coaching beyond the game. It's GPA attendance, the impact of resiliency and mental health, that long-term development that coaches have an impact on. So joining me today are, again, 2 of my really good friends and 2 men that have kind of helped lead this work. Kyle Craighead from Everise and Dr. Josh Childs from the University of Texas in Austin. Kyle, Josh, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thank you, Libby. Thanks for having us.
thanks for having us.
Before we get started, let's learn a little bit about you guys. Kyle, you've hung out with us on the podcast before, but just to remind our audience, let's start with you. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, Everise, and just how did this research project begin?
Yeah, so I'm Kyle Craighead, and my background is in education. So I was in the classroom for 10 years, assistant principal for a while, district leader for a while, coached a little bit of everything, became athletic director, and then obviously went the admin route. Had a blast in every day in education. But when it came to how are we making an impact, what I knew is that I wanted to have a larger impact than just my local area where I lived. And so Everise came along, and it made a lot of sense to me because I was going to be able to work with school leaders and sports leaders like we're able to do now. Really, at Everise, we measure the quality of key relationships. We deliver targeted professional development to coaches, and that's with the goal of achieving superior outcomes in any domain where human connection is the primary driver for success. And what better than coaches? Coaches, it's all built on connection. Everything revolves around connection. And while we'll get into that more later, you can see the passion that comes through is that coaches do this every day. Now we're able to measure it. This research began through our co-owners and CEO Randy Ecker and then Tim Prukop, who had a relationship with THSCA and said, "Hey, this is work that you all might be interested in." We immediately hit it off as soon as we started meeting. And then Libby, I think you remember very well the first time that we all met with you and Joe and Glenn and Brian. And you said, "I know someone you need to meet," and that person is on this call here now, who I work with every day. So it's become a family because we all have a very similar, shared, common mission.
I agree. I do remember that, just that whole time frame when we all kind of got connected to each other. And I think God brings people into your life at the right time when you need them. And this connection was just natural. So Josh, Dr. Childs, will you tell us a little bit about yourself? Kind of same question. Tell us about your work at UT, and then how you became involved in that researching the impact of athletics, and why it was just a natural fit for us whenever we met Kyle.
Yeah, thanks. So, again, Josh Childs. I'm an associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin in our College of Education, specifically our Educational Leadership and Policy Department. I've been at UT since 2016. I'm a native Texan, not born and raised, just raised. I grew up in the North Dallas, Plano, Texas, to be exact, area. Graduate of Plano West High School. Played football under THSCA Hall of Honor member Mark Reeve. Played basketball for current Highland Park basketball coach David Peeler. Ran track and field for retired coach Richard Grubbs. Then made my way to the University of Tulsa, where I ran track and field. Then University of Colorado Boulder, where I got my master's and my PhD at the University of Pittsburgh. And luckily enough, I was one of, I think, several hundred people who applied for the job at UT Austin and got it, and made my way back to the Lone Star State after being away for over a decade, and where I teach master's, PhD, and EDD students in ed policy and leadership. And I became, as a former athlete, former student athlete, I think there's such an importance between the connection between student athletes and their coaches, student athletes and schools, and just the role that athletics plays when it comes to how students connect and engage within academic learning environments. And I think it's often an understudied area within at least my field of education. A lot of times we focus on teachers, we focus on class sizes, we focus on curriculum, but we don't necessarily really explore the role of co-curricular activities such as interscholastic athletics. And I think it's so important because many students, many kids participate in athletics, particularly starting at a young age. And so it's important to really understand the impact that athletics plays within our educational environments. And because we're in a great state like Texas, our coaches are educators. They have to be educators. They have to work for that district, especially in our public school settings where they serve in dual roles as both teacher coach or administrator coach or paraprofessional coach. And so they occupy these dual roles within these student athletes' lives that impact them not just when they're in the building, but outside the building and once they leave our schooling systems as well. And so I think it's important research that to be studying and to be engaged in every day. And it's such a pleasure to be working with you all on this important work.
Well, those of you guys who are around any UIL events, any THSCA events, Josh is definitely a familiar face to THSCA members. You see him around a lot, and specifically because he knows how important this is, and it helps him in his work and his studies and things like that. So glad you were able to be on our side. You've been super invaluable to us, Josh, as an association in lots of different ways. So let's actually dive into the work and the research that we've all kind of been introducing here in a little bit. Kyle, you just heard Josh refer to it as co-curricular versus extracurricular. And from your perspective, why is it important that we now have that hard data to support education-based athletics?
I think it's important because of us for years and years and years talking about how extracurricular activities are so important in schools. However, it's so hard to defend if someone wants to cut something or they say this isn't as important as this thing over here, like maybe it's curriculum materials, like Josh mentioned, and you don't have the data to back it up. I will say this as a former school leader and somebody who was heavily tied in all aspects of the school, especially in the extracurricular activities, is that that's where the kids learn to listen to a mentor who's guiding them with a common interest. And I'll give this example, and this isn't to down anything. I was a science teacher, so I'll use that so no one thinks I'm making fun of a particular subject. I'm not going to choose English for you, Libby, but I'll go with science here. Very few of my students that I got in Bio 1 were really pumped up about Bio 1. Now, by the end of the year, the goal was that they all had a healthy respect for it, understood why it was important to learn it. But when they would join science club, then they found that common passion and interest that I would have with them in science club. But what was happening is that they could say, "Hey, I have somebody that I relate to, that we have something to talk about, and they can challenge me like no one else can." And that's why connection and challenge work so well together. And in the world of sports, there's just no better way than to get immediate feedback on a practice field or on a practice court of that didn't go well, coach is there. There's an immediate, hey, this is how we can do this better. That's learning from mistakes. There's also that piece of coach reads you today and is like, I don't know, they don't seem to be themselves. Well, that's because they have a connection. The psych safety's high and the coach understands that player. And nowhere else in the school is that happening daily like it is in sports. Even when kids are out for summer, they're still with their coaches. Even when kids are off for Thanksgiving, some of the sports, they're still with their coaches. Fall break, spring break, they're still with their coaches because that's the person who's their mentor, it's their confidant, and it's the person that they go to and say, hey, coach, what is it that I need to do next? That means they're asking to be challenged out of their comfort zone. And then they'll apply that somewhere else. They'll apply that in geometry. They'll apply that when they get their first job. That's why this is co-curricular. That's why this is so important. It's human life lessons learned on the field of life, but it's athletics. And that's why we think this is important. That's why we think we need to have this data is to show it because we've known it in our bones for a long time to be important. But until you actually have numbers, it's just a hope, and hope is not a strategy. We can't strategize our way through this by telling great stories. The stories matter. The numbers need to go with those stories.
Josh, I mean, you do academic research like for a living. And so, from an academic research standpoint, what makes this study stand out? Why is this significant compared to all the other conversations about surrounding sports?
Yeah, I would say three things related to that. One being that oftentimes we tend to know and we tend to have a feeling about something, and we only wish we had data to back up that feeling or what we believe we know. And this is an opportunity, has been the opportunity to have data to what coaches have been saying, athletic directors have been seeing, community members have been feeling when they are watching a Friday night or a Thursday afternoon or a playoff tournament or a state championship game for decades, particularly in the state of Texas. And to show that coaches impact student athletes and student athletes are impacted by their coaches. And now we can measure that. And we're measuring that not just through a single student athlete or a single kind of school, but over multiple schools across the state and to a larger degree across the country. I'd say the second thing, and um, Kyle alluded to this, right? That it goes beyond stories, but our stories matter. So if you think about what many of us were watching, got up early for this past Sunday to watch the USA men's hockey team defeat Big Bad Evil Canada in their own kind of game, right? I think if you stayed till the end of the broadcast, Mike Tirico said something super important, and I kind of want to read a little bit for it. And he said, "So for all the young people out there, not just the hockey, but all the Olympics you've watched, those dreams are formed now. Go chase them and go get them because our country loves sports and it brings us together unlike anything else." And I think that quote captures the fact of how important sports matters, athletics matters in our state, in our country, and how much we invest on it, both monetarily, emotionally, psychologically, physically. And I think having research data that then shows the impact and shows why it matters is so important as we continue to invest and pour into young people every single day and support coaches and athletic directors who do that. And then the third thing I would say is, let's be honest, the sports that I grew up loving and playing, the sports that you all on the call, and maybe many of you all who are listening grew up loving and playing, have changed. And the ways in which young people, our young student athletes, are engaging in sports, while there's so many things that are good, particularly in our education-based athletics, there are some threats to that. And so, what we have to understand the value that a coach brings, particularly a coach who has education pedigree, that has a connection with the student athlete, that has a connection with the school and the community, the value they bring in connecting with their student athlete that goes beyond just wins and losses is important. Because as these threats, such as private equity in our youth sports, such as academies coming into our sports that may, in some ways, are trying to trump over our public or education-based athletics, we need to understand and be able to use data to tell the story of the importance of education-based athletics, right? And the value that student athletes get from that. And so to me, as a researcher, this is important because um, stories matter and stories are powerful, but stories are powerful when you have data and the experience behind that. And now we're able to merge both of them here in the state of Texas.
I don't think it can be understated. I think anybody that's listening to this call is invested in athletics. They're invested in our kids. They're invested in our athletes and communities. And so I really don't think it can be overstated how important it is, not just for these men and these institutions that have done this study, but even for us at THSCA, we truly see this as it's important that we are able to maintain what our coaches know to be true, that athletics matters, that we make an impact on not just an athlete's lives but truly in our communities and ultimately our country. And again, it sounds like such a big trite statement at some point, but if there's any other time in our country right now where all of this can we can come together as through sports and things. And now we have some support to be able to help our coaches with that in a way that other people need that support and need that evidence as well. So let's specifically talk for these next few minutes about the specifically about that research and how it was gathered. Let's talk methodology. So again, as we've said over and over, this research isn't based just on stories. We had 34,000 plus student athlete assessments nationwide and over 11,000 in Texas alone. Josh, can you walk us through how that data was collected and analyzed?
Yeah, absolutely. And Kyle, feel free to fill in some gaps too that I missed. So we were super fortunate. Everise team has a great infrastructure, great team. Ashley Olson in particular, who helped to navigate the connections, the relationships with school districts in Texas that allowed us to be able to do this research, building relationships not only with people in their central office and their research departments, but also with athletic directors to be able to survey students. Students filled out a survey, took no longer than 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes max, of a series of questions asking about their relationship with their coach, how their coach feeds into them, what does participating in their sport look like and mean. And we were able to, all that data went to an anonymous, it was anonymized, went to an independent server. And from there, we were able to analyze the data and look at trends, look at how student athletes were answering the questions. We were able to differentiate the data based upon different types of sport, what season, the gender of the sport, meaning if it was a male or female or girl participant sport, um, and even looking at by things like region. So we had broken up. We wanted to make sure, and this is important from a research standpoint, we wanted to make sure that we had a great representation of the entire state of Texas. So we weren't just looking at large urban areas, that we were capturing rural school districts. We were capturing places on the coast. We were capturing places in West Texas and East Texas and North Texas and Central Texas, all the Texases. And so that was important to us. And then we analyzed it. We asked questions to the data that allowed us to see different types of outputs, such as the ratio, the percentage of how students were connecting with their coaches, how safe they felt with the coaches, and so forth. Anything else to add there, Kyle? I think that's pretty much captures the kind of approach that we took to this data.
Yeah, I think you hit all of it, Josh, especially the geographic pieces that we made sure everyone was accounted for, but also some of the demographic pieces with free and reduced lunches in schools, title schools, ELL percentages in schools. We made sure that there was a representation there as well that was fairly equal, so that we didn't have just one area or group of students who were dominating the assessment results.
So, Kyle, why did you include student athletes? Why was that student athlete voice such an important part of this research, and why include them and not just ask administrators and coaches?
Yeah, so this is the thing in education is we ask the people so often who are making the decisions, but not necessarily the consumers of those decisions. Now, we did use a coach assessment because they're on the front lines here. They're and our motto here is helping coaches help kids. We need coach information, but mostly we needed the information from the students about their coaching and athletic experience. And in that, we could ask things that weren't just about what we would normally say about how does your coach do at coaching you in your skills. We could say, how often do they ask about life outside of sport? We could ask, how often do they make you feel like an important part of the team? Do they give you individual feedback every practice? And then to take it even a step further, with you all's direction, Libby, with THSCA's direction, we started asking about athletic period and the power of athletic period and why that's important and what that means to student athletes. And then beyond that, about what do they like about the culture of their school, about pep rallies, and why does the education-based athletics model really work for them, to be able to then look at other models that exist and say, well, we know this is working, and 92% of the student athletes that filled this out are rated at a level 5, meaning they strongly agree this is important to them. So to not ask them, it doesn't even tell half the story. It's only telling a small portion of the story. And many of those times it ends up being an anecdote. It's that I heard a few kids tell me something, and then we start projecting that, rather than 30 something thousand kids said blank. That's a different argument, and it's a different tone, and it allows us to react better, which is why that's so important.
Good. Um, this is a one episode of kind of some longer conversations. Later on, we're going to talk about exactly how those measurements and how this data can help coaches get better, can help administrators get better, can drive professional development. And then how we actually use it here at THSCA, how we've been able to use it to defend um, athletics across the entire state. So, those of you guys, again, who are listening, make sure you tune into those future episodes because we're not going to have time to do all of that today, but I think it's an important part of the lessons of this research. So, but let's talk a little bit about that data and some of the things, just highlight a few points because we found a lot of stuff up. So one of the most powerful findings was within that GPA difference. Student athletes averaged a 3.63 GPA compared to 3.02 for non-athletes. That's a significant difference. Josh, how significant is that just in educational research terms?
I mean, that shows the value of two things. Kyle thinks I was going to say three, but I only have two now. One, just overall the value of having a student participate in a co-curricular activity like athletics, that being engaged in something that provides structure, provides other opportunities to engage in educational activities and learning environments can help in improve in academic outcomes and engagement outcomes, etc. And the second part is the importance of having a coach, importance of having another educator that can pour into, connect, build psychological safety, communicate with a student who is part of a larger schooling environment. And so with that GPA, what we can make some assumptions on is one saying that when a student is involved in this co-curricular activity, that they are having the supports necessary to thrive in academic learning environments, because learning does not just end when they leave English, math, science, social studies class. It continues on the field, on the court. And what we do know from learning science research and learning research overall is that students make connections between their learned environments and the learning environments in which they're part of. So learning can take place on the field and on the bus ride to the next game. Learning takes place in the classroom with other students in 20 desks, and it takes place on the practice field as I'm shooting free throws, right? Because we got to talk about percentages, we got to talk about angles, right? And so that matters. So I think these numbers show the value of athletics, the value of co-curriculars in our schools, particularly in Texas. And just to add one other little part to that, the value, what we also did was another little part was the value of having another period, an athletic period, to support students working with their coach, their educator coach in another environment setting that supports their academic learning.
Well, one of the things we have not had time and we won't have time in this episode to talk about are just, and both of you guys have referred to it several different times, psychological safety, connection, structure, communication. What really this data is based on are six pillars. And that we know that are pillars of an effective coach. And again, we'll dive into those in another episode. But one of the things that we have learned through this report is that it does connect coaching behaviors to outcomes. So, Kyle, can you explain just the really quick explain the connection between high scores, and connection and communication and some of those other six pillars and that increase in GPA among student athletes?
It's really exciting when you do this research and you see that the coaches who are really strong, maybe in connection and communication, they have really good structure to what they do. And when you start seeing their average team GPA, their average team absences, and then what ends up happening is these coaches end up getting clustered together. We have no idea who they are. It's all anonymous at this point. They all start getting clustered together and you see all these high GPAs together. Well, why is that? Well, because they're high in communication and connection and challenge. And you just have these top level coaches in what their student athletes are saying about their experience. But then you're also seeing that they're way above their school average, and it's their school, that their coaches are just pushing them beyond. Well, what I would say is these coaches have put in structures and systems that work for kids, and they found their ways of working them. And what they've done is they've likely replicated it to other coaches. And that's what we want to see more of. So why is this important? Is we need to find out what the best coaches are doing, because some things out there, what we have done right now is identified, there's magic occurring. The next step is now let's demystify the magic. What are these moves that work? Now let's replicate those easy moves that these coaches are doing repeatedly so that others can do it and then help their kids too. Because there's not a magic bullet that we need. And it's also not something that we need to go research or hear from someone else from, 6 states away. It's happening down the hall. A coach down the hall is doing something that's amazing. We just have to amplify it out there. And through our system, we can do that.
Excellent. So we are running out of time for this episode, but I do have one last question to ask each of you guys. And so before we end, so after analyzing all this data, what would you say directly to coaches across Texas and across the country about what you have found? Again, knowing this is going to be a little teaser probably for our next episodes, but what would you say to coaches? Josh, we'll start with you.
That's a wonderful question. I would say that coaches matter more than they are given credit for. And coaches should not see themselves as invisible members or only important on game day members of the school community and environment. That the work that you do, the lives that you impact, more so than some professions or positions, even within a school and or district, extend beyond 4 quarters of a game, a school year, or a student's academic career. They have life changing implications. Personally, I would not be a professor if it wasn't for coaches pouring into me and teaching me values that I still use to this day. And I'm sure if we were to go and talk to people, I bet that they would point to the impact of a coach or someone in an athletic type position that influences them to this day when it comes to the things that we value as adults, like hard work, perseverance, struggle, um, responding to failure, etc. So I think that's what I would say, and I hope that the data continues to show that and the value of that.
Kyle, can you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say that second a lot of what Josh said here, that coaches are making more of an impact than they ever thought they were, and the data shows it. So while we've thought it for a long time, while we've talked about it for a long time, and we all pick out that coach and tell the story, like Josh just said, about I wouldn't be here doing this if it wasn't for coach so and so. We actually have data now that shows the impact that you're making, even sometimes on the kids that you would never have known you're making that large of an impact on. And if you aren't measuring that, then you need to start. Because eventually, this system, this institution that we have may not be here as we know it, like Libby, you said earlier, with maintaining what we have. It may not be here in its current structure if we're not careful and we don't start showing the positive impact that we have. We have to tell the positive story, and it feels like bragging, and coaches are terrible at this. So the main thing that I would say to coaches is let's talk about the difference that we're making. Let's talk about the impact that we're having on kids, because someone's going to be talking about coaches, and it's time that they talk about the right things.
Absolutely. So, just as a reminder, in upcoming episodes, we're going to dive deeper into exactly how coaches can use this data, how athletic directors, policymakers can use it in practical ways, from shaping development, professional development, strengthening team culture, becoming better coaches. And then again, just the overall impact on what the future of athletics might possibly look like in Texas. So, to our coaches that are listening, if you didn't get this from this conversation, sum it all up. The impact that you're making reaches far beyond the scoreboard, and it's showing up in the classrooms, attendance, confidence, resilience, lifelong leadership. And now we have data to prove that. Gentlemen, thank you guys for hanging out with us and sharing this information, and look forward to our next conversation about this. And Chris, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much. I tell you, this subject is one of the subjects that excites me the most. It's one of the books I wrote was about this very subject. But I do want to point out that we're all in agreement. The coaches who are listening are probably all in agreement. But at the end of the day, we can't just be an echo chamber. So share this episode, get it out there, get it to your parents, get it to your community, because it's so important. I love that. Thank you so much, Libby. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Josh. Gosh, what a great episode.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Hey, coaches, did you know we're now offering shows for all sports? That's right. Whether it's basketball, volleyball, softball, baseball, football, soccer, you name it, we've got you covered. If you're looking for a way to showcase your program, promote your players, and highlight the amazing things happening with your team, our coaches shows are the perfect solution. Plus, our business model lets you or your booster club raise money while building excitement and support for your program. Don't miss the opportunity to take your team's story to the next level. Find out how you can get your very own coaches show. Reach out to Chris at 713-269-4620 today. That's 713-269-4620, because every team deserves the spotlight. Hey, of course, I want to thank our guest, but I also want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving me what I consider the most valuable thing you can give, your time and your attention. And I know you don't do it to hear me. You do it for the great messages provided by the THSCA. And hey, if you'd like to associate your company with the THSCA and the Coach's Call podcast, limited sponsorship opportunities are available. You can reach out to me, Chris Daly, 713-269-4620, or head over to my website, freshmediaworks.com. Once again, thank you so much for supporting Texas high school coaches. Please share this show out to everybody you can so that we can help share these important messages. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next time on The Coach's Call. The interviews in this show are brought to you by the Texas High School Coaches Association. THSCA provides to its more than 26,000 members access to the people, events, tools, and resources to help them thrive in the profession, become trusted leaders in their communities, and live balanced and successful lives. The work and sacrifice coaches do every day is vital to the development and success of student athletes. The THSCA supports these efforts. We fight for every coach, provide them with the connections and resources to improve their lives, and help all student athletes throughout the state enjoy lasting success. The mission statement is simply this: to help and serve Texas high school coaches as they work to help and serve student athletes. Helping coaches help kids. For more information on the THSCA, visit www.thsca.com.